on Photography is a series of conversations with contemporary image makers, critics, gallery directors, and theoreticians. Hi, I'd like to welcome you to the VASA On Photography series. Our guest artist today is Eva Petric. She's currently in Slovenia. Eva is a multimedia artist living and working in Slovenia, Ljubjana, Vienna, and New York City. Her work includes installations, video, photography, writings, and performances. Her work is recognized on an international level with over 60 solo exhibitions and installations. She holds a degree in psychology from Vienna and an MFA in new media from Berlin. So let me welcome you here. And hi, Eva.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's nice to see you after all these years.
Yes, just so the audience knows, we met about 5 years ago.
I think so.
You had an exhibition at Photon Gallery in Vienna. And that's the first time I saw your work and got a chance to talk to you about it. And I've been following your career and development since then. So anyway, how are you doing?
I'm good. I actually thought that because of the quarantine, I would be a lot less busy, but I find myself really busy still, so that's the same for me. What's not the same is that I'm usually really spread out between 3 places, as you mentioned, Vienna, Slovenia, and New York, which hasn't been the case. I've been now longer in my home place, Bled, than I've been since I can remember, which is helping me get a lot of studio work done, which is good. But on the other hand, yeah, my way of working has changed a bit too, and so not that much traveling.
Okay. Yeah. We also like to talk to you before we leave today. Is how do you work and how does that develop? But I'm curious. You have a bachelor's degree, a degree in psychology from Vienna, and you have this MFA in new media, which you earned in Berlin. How do those two affect your work and your thinking about making work?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I've always been interested in psychology because it represents to me the mind, the psyche, the human, the inside, the traumas, challenges that people deal with that, you know, with psychology and giving attention to people, you can help to overcome. And for me, art is also about the human and the inner invisible world. So they're very linked. But the way I got myself caught into both was maybe not so much by will, but at home I had the pressure, because nobody is an artist in my family, to have like a real profession. So my parents said, you know, you have to study something that you can really have a job from. So the deal was kind of, well, I can do art if I do also another double major. So I finished psychology as quickly as I could, and then had the time to do the other double major, which was visual arts. And of course, my whole plan was always to remain in the arts, and that's where I am.
I think many of us have experienced that. My first work was in the area of education. I taught elementary school for a few years, which made my family happy. I had a job and I was making money. As soon as I moved into fine arts, it was like questionable. You know, what are you doing with your life? So, okay, let's look at your work and talk about your work a bit, okay?
Yes. So I'll switch over. And actually, this is how we met. And I remember when I met you at my artist talk in Gallery Photon, you asked me a question specifically about this work, which is for me kind of a summary of a large portion of black and white analog photography that I spent a lot of my time with. It's the periodic table of shadowed emotions. And here you can see how psychology, even if I would not want it to, always creeps up in my work.
Okay. You have to share your screen with us, though. We haven't seen it. Yes.
Sorry, really? Aha. I hope you see now.
Yes,
the
we got
periodic table of shadowed emotions. And as you can see, it's the fascinating structure and table that, you know, kind of condenses how the physical world is composed and what it's made out of. And so I was fascinated that this little table can summarize basically our whole life in a way. But of course, it talks about the physical aspect of life. And I was interested, can I use this structure and system that has been around for so long and is continually developing? We're discovering new elements, new compounds. Can it be used to also talk about the invisible world, which is also part of our physical world, the world of emotions, the ephemeral world? So I played around with the idea of using shadows as visualizing emotions, because to me they're very similar in their structure. You can't, contain either one of them. They're very evasive, yet they are here. They affect us, and they're constantly changing, full of potential. So I spent about a year, really obsessing and being kind of always taking photos of my shadow in the early morning hours, and then going to the dark room and reworking these negatives into original images in the dark room. And after a while, I was surrounded by all these shadows, and I thought, well, I have to put them in some kind of system. And then this idea came to me, well, if I have so many shadows, they must be telling me something. And can you create a language of shadows? So from the influence of psychology and how chemistry defines our life and our psyche, this idea to place them in a periodic table came to me. And actually, this I would call is kind of the DNA blueprint of my work, because I always come back to it in a way. And it's actually existing. All these images that you see in this table are a pullout in a big 2,000-page book of these shadows. And it's like my Bible. And I always return to it, even for the most recent projects that I've done that I will show you, which is a public art sculpture piece.
Eva, before you change, I'm interested what you said about a language of shadows. Could you explain that more?
Yes. So this was for me at that period of my life. Honestly, everything I did was connected with shadows, and more so, I was not interested in showing the source of the shadow. As you can see in this image, for example, it's a triptych of called Corazon Heart, Siamese heart. And I thought, they must have a language of their own. They're here for some reason. And I did a big study looking how the shadow has appeared throughout art, from the idea of the caves and Plato's writings to like new technology and how art is used, or paintings by Picasso. And I always found a relation to how they are caricatures of emotions. So for me, they're giving, like, expressing an emotional language or caricaturing our emotions. And the idea for a language came also from seeing Lucien Clerc's exhibition in Vienna at the Kunsthaus, which actually led to him being my mentor after for my MFA. I wrote him and asked him if he would be the mentor of this project, Language of Shadows, because there I saw a little, a 4-piece work where it was language of sand, and that's where it clicked. Aha, all my shadows are actually a language of shadows.
Yeah.
And yeah. After a while, for me, photography is the base of my work, but I always try to show it in a bit different ways, or try to approach it from maybe what you shouldn't do with photography. So I look for different ways of how to present it. And this was one of my very early installations in the museum, City Museum in Slovenia. The installation is called Current. And as I like with most of my work is for it to be interactive and to look at it from all different aspects. There is not like a correct way of how to perceive my work. And it's always changing because it's dependable on the natural light. So it's very, how to say, in a way, honest, like human, with its imperfections and changes. And so as you can see, I wanted the pieces in themselves to be also like shadows. I chose plexiglass, which is also kind of evasive and ephemeral, and I had the pieces hanging so that also the reflection of viewers would interact with the pieces, and started moving away from the wall. And after a while, I wanted to also move away from the gallery space which is for me, of course, an honor to be in good galleries and museums, but I think it's more fulfilling when you see how your artwork touches or communicates with people outside of the gallery space, because those people, you know, are not necessarily art people. So it's harder to get their attention, but often a lot more fulfilling. And one of the installations was here, you can see in the subway station in Vienna. And I chose to do the project during November 1st, the time of the dead, because I said not everybody can go. The European tradition often, you know, is that November 1st you go and visit the graves of your dead loved ones. So I said, well, you know, you can travel back in time through memory and through thinking of people. So in a way, the shadow is timeless. You can travel back with it. And this space where you see this window, it's located really down, down, down in the subway. So I chose to title the piece Eurydica's Spirit Box, like the world of Hades, where you go deep underneath and you have to believe, you can't doubt, as the story of Eurydica says. And I actually showed in this space later a couple times more.
Okay, I know this space, because I lived in Vienna also, and thousands of people go by here daily. Did you receive any comments or feedback from the people?
Yes, I did. Unfortunately, I don't have a photo here. The next installation I did was with the positives of human hearts, like real positives of human hearts, for the 50-year anniversary of the first heart transplant and bypass. And that was a quite conceptual art piece. And I was actually really skeptical and kind of scared if anyone is going to even stop and, you know, realize there's something there to look at. And here I got to observe people without them knowing I'm the artist. I would come here, you know, every so often during the show, and I would see quite a lot of people stop and look at the artwork, which was very fulfilling because it meant that it caught their attention, which is hard to do in a place like a subway station.
Right, because people are going somewhere or coming from somewhere, and yeah.
Exactly. So this is another angle of the installation, but at a very different place. This was very recent in St. Louis, downtown arcade building. And like I mentioned, I spent a lot of time with black and white photography because it enabled me to really work with my hands and not be just exclusively a photographer, which I'm not fascinated by the camera or any technical aspect of photography, but more in catching the mystery of reality, which is for me the greatest mystery. But after a while, I started to miss even more tactileness in my work. And I had a big problem with one show in Buenos Aires because of transport and logical, you know, just very banal issues. So I actually started to work with the other main medium I work with a lot, and which I also combine with photography. And this is what you see here, the lace installations, which are all recycled doilies and laces from all over the world, mostly created by anonymous people, which I bring together into like a collective story. And I create various objects. Here it's a formation of stars and the Big Bang. And I combine projections, which brings me back to photography, and sound and performance art as well.
Well, when you set up an installation, do you have a chance to visit the site ahead of time so you plan out the installation, or is it planned out before you get there?
Preferably visit the place, and this installation here was one of my first main ones. It was in the Museum of Modern Art in Klagenfurt, and here I really got the chance to visit the place numerous times so I could really prepare. Unfortunately, you can't always do that. Like in St. Louis, the recent show I had was a 6,000 square foot space, and there was no way I could visit it. I didn't have the time, and also it was costly to just fly there. I didn't want to load the gallery's budget. And that was harder because even when you come to the space and you have everything planned out, you realize you really have to be in the space for a while to optimally set up everything. So for me, my main joy is to work in site-specific installations, and that really means feeling the space, not just like seeing what is there formally, but also having a kind of real feeling for it, because I think places are charged with energy. And as an artist, I think we can allow ourselves to look at spaces from that angle as well.
Well, the two installations you showed us, this one and the one where there was windows at the end of the gallery space. I mean, I can imagine the challenge with the changing of light, right? I mean, where the sun is, what kind of light comes in the evening, and the effect on the work itself, the experience of the work for viewers when the lighting is different. Yeah.
That's true. I mean, that's for me like the biggest fascination with work, to let also, which is the same thing as in photography, reality take its hold and, be the co-actor.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about the image as it is created and then it stays and remains like that. It's about how it interacts with the space. And I think it's just as challenging and important how a work of art is placed in a space, not just the work itself. That's definitely, 50%, I think, of a show and how it works.
Yeah.
And what is kind of similar in my black and white shadow and also lace, which is symbolizing for me skin installations, is they both, deal with kind of universal metaphors and the universal how to show the connections and similarities between people. My work mostly relates to humans and people. For example, this piece here, it's called The Giver. It was a time when I worked a lot with different medical institutions, which is still something I continue to work with. And it came about from me being present in a live transplant of kidneys. And actually the projection you can see here, it's actually the close-up of the transplant occurring. And the shell is symbolizing the woman who donated one of her kidneys to her husband. So for me, art is always a kind of, which again comes to psychology, a bridge of, showing facts from medicine and science, which are defining what our life is and how our life is, showing them from a bit different angle, and maybe also widening the what a fact is and placing in some questions and making them more approachable for viewers.
Well, that
Because
must have
after,
been an interesting experience being in the operating room as they worked on the transplant.
yes, it was very interesting. My first opportunity to do this was in Favalora Hospital in Buenos Aires, where I showed a lot. I was invited to take part in a heart bypass, and I thought the surgeon is absolutely insane, but at the same time, I knew I will never have this opportunity in my life again, and I was very curious as to how my work will be more informed, because this is what he actually told me. He said, your books, your novels, your photography, your shadows, they all deal with emotion and the human, but if you would see the real human heart in front of you, you would look at life differently. So I felt that as a real challenge and call to adventure that I had to accept, and I was trembling the night before. But I got really hooked. I mean, not to the experience itself, which is, not a nice one. It's terrifying to be in there. You also by no means want to be in the way of surgeons and their important work. So you really want to be like a shadow. But to realize the fragility of life and the human body is fascinating, and to try to transport these realizations and reflections into artworks for people to be triggered to reflect on is I think something, it's like an obligation almost. Yeah, for me, that's how I feel.
Well, what kind of effect did it have on you?
Like I said, I was absolutely scared.
I can imagine.
But
Yeah.
I was completely calm. I felt myself as if like floating above and watching, being very fascinated how it's such, any little thing can go wrong in an operating room and it can be a complete disaster in there. Everybody has to really work together, not just the humans, the machines with the humans, and the human body, specifically the heart that I had the first encounter with, is at the same time so uh, poor in a way. It's so, connected to everything, has to function in the body for it to survive and work well. But at the same time, all the things that are being done to that poor heart in an operation, wow, it's very durable too. So this actually, made me more firm in then using the lace, as you can see here, for example. It's called Collective Heart, and it's, I think, inspired from this experience too, because it's referring to the anatomical heart, and that maybe something like a collective heart exists, which for me would be emotions, because they enable us to connect to one another, to perceive each other, understand each other, to in a way jump into the skin of another person.
Well, just out of curiosity, I mean, for the viewer, how big are these pieces? The ones we saw this before this?
Yeah.
I mean,
So this piece was
yeah.
about, I think, 4 meters, maybe by 4, something like that. And then this piece is 11 meters, which is 36 feet, and wide 13 feet to 5.5 meters. This is my biggest piece, one of my biggest pieces. Yes, these are also then the clouds, the emotional clouds: Liebe, Glaube, Hoffnung, love, belief, faith, love, hope, faith.
Mhm.
Um, are also 10 meters by 6 meters each. And they had to be as very big so they would not be lost in this, all-encompassing space of the St. Stephansdom Cathedral in Vienna. But my way is also naturally, I like to work big because, like I said, I'm fascinated with site-specific work, and a lot of site-specific projects are, maybe big halls that are deserted, that need art to transform them into something more alive and positive. Or often I find myself, for some reason, in church spaces with my installations, which are also big.
Maybe it's your shadows coming out, But I was lucky enough to see this installation at St. Stephen's in Vienna, and it was amazing. Just the presence of these structures that you put in there, especially over the main altar area, was quite amazing and quite pleasing, I guess is a good way of putting it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that piece, I have to admit, I didn't have a lot of time to create it. I had no idea if I ended up making the size of the piece like large enough, or was it too large, until we set it up there. And we also didn't have a lot of time because they have mass regularly, so you have to work between the mass and to set up the work. And the same thing was in St. John the Divine Cathedral, which is the image you see now. Here I was actually scared the piece will disappear because that cathedral is just huge, and they've never had an art piece on the high altar. So for me, that was really a great joy to be able to kind of really achieve my dream of having the work also here in this spiritual place. St. John the Divine Cathedral is fascinating because it says, "Welcome all religions." So it really, I thought, communicated well the vision of the art piece as well, which doesn't define or create any barriers. It accepts everyone, which is also the story about the lace. So as you see, the whole constellation of laces, it's created with all these separate laces holding each other, supporting each other, and if one little string breaks, all the threads at some point will resonate. And this is another photo. So during the 6-month show at St. John the Divine, they had a lot of different events, like the New York City Philharmonics, or Laurie Anderson with her performance of Lou Reed's Drones. There was even a fire here before the Notre Dame fire, 3 days before. So my collective heart got filled with some of that smoke. And there was another piece that was commissioned by the cathedral. They wanted hanging down. So this is called Safety Blanket. And it's a reference to religion, how it can be a safety blanket for us. And I placed it just above one's ability to reach the piece. So the idea was also, you know, religion gives you a feeling of safety, but it's never something you can really grasp. So from another angle with the shadows, and another installation in another outside of the gallery space was at the United Nations in the delegates entrance, with 2 large murals on the left and right side. You can't unfortunately see, of Portinari, Brazilian artist. And this was for the time of Earth Day, and how basically there should be a sustainable Earth for each and every human being. And here you can kind of see my work then graduated also into creating different forms, like kind of human, half robotic human forms on either side of the circular shape that can be either an embryo or world or mandala. So again, showing kind of the inability to separate the human from nature and how we are constantly bounded by it. And another project is the Sing for Hope. Maybe you've seen it. I wish they had it also in Europe, but it's been there for 10 years in New York, and it's founded by Camila Zamora, who finds 50 pianos every year that are donated, and then 50 artists are chosen based on their proposals to visualize pianos but still keep them intact for people to play. And they place them on this big plaza at 28 Liberty Street in the financial district, and then all over the city. Each piano goes somewhere for 2 to 3 weeks, and anybody who passes by can play. So it's really an outreach through art. And then each piano is donated to underprivileged schools, usually in the Bronx or other places. And here I decided to reference, because of the place where the project was being created, Ground Zero. So 9/11 was polluted by the laces or clouds memories, and to show how music is also something that helps us overcome traumas, and it's something that's, you know, common to us all humans and travels around the world like clouds do. And I participated again this year with another project last year. This year it's canceled because of the coronavirus. This year I was actually supposed to have in this space, if you see behind the big windows, a big video project, but it was canceled or postponed due to Corona as well. And another space, you can't see that well, but this is the underground caves in Slovenia. It's a protected cave with 200-year-old cave since it's been discovered, stalagmatites and stalactites. And I had this installation here for the 200-year anniversary. It's called White Hole. So references the antithesis to a black hole, again, inspired from science, and using projection and sound on the installation. And I mentioned before Positive of the Human Heart. And you can see here, that's one of the 3 I have. And it was part of a show on bioethics in the Radiator Gallery in New York. And here I was, in a way, confronted with interesting and controversial thought. You know, they wanted the piece to be on sale, but of course it didn't seem to me ethical or right to place the Positive of a Human Heart on sale. So we reached an agreement that if it would be bought by someone, it would be donated to a hospital. But again, it brings in the idea, you know, what can be really an art piece, and can a human heart also be considered an art piece, which I for sure, after my experiences of the transplants and bypass surgery, definitely think it can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I use this this heart also in my performances. So I've integrated my lace installations as backdrops for my videos that I've created often also with photographs and sound and choreography. And it's called Eden Transplanted, and you're actually one of the first ones who presented this on VASA as well, my performance. And I have this performance in various locations, and it tackles with the question, where is the future home for mankind? And when, you know, circumstances on Earth will be no longer available for us to really live within.
Well, just as a little footnote, that video, that installation performance, is archived on the VASA site, and it's in the left-hand menu where you see film series, and you'll find a link to her work, and I invite you all to come and see it.
Thank you. And just to show how I haven't gone, I always come back to photography. So the projection you saw on the lace from the performance piece is how I got then to kind of really combining photography with my lace work, because I really do one and the other equally. So I started to create these so-called layered images where you see the lace and the photograph, and they were both created at different times, but then through the performance, basically and captured again as a photograph. And I show them in various ways through light boxes or this kind of sculptures in plexiglass. And another recent show was this summer, We All Breathe the Same Air, and it was a sound installation with also these lace pieces hanging in a space. It's a church where art shows are shown regularly in Piran, and it was so the idea, we all breathe the same air, molecules of air, and air that I brought from the three regions where I live. You can see in the center, that's one of them. It says Dunaj, which is Vienna in Slovene. And I had a performance with letting out this air from the three different spaces. And I also actually combined photography and lace. And instead of just collecting old recycled laces for my big installations, I was also interested, can you translate the black and white shadows into lace? So I found some women who are skilled in creating laces to translate into new forms based on the shadow photographs. And one of these is called Stem Cell. And I presented this in the form of a plexiglass as a public art installation in Vienna in last April till October. And this was a fascinating experience. My work got actually vandalized and destroyed even before the opening. But yeah, it didn't stop me from wanting to work with public art. And the next piece that I have now, which brings me back to the original image I showed you, I said my periodic table of shadows follows me. So this is a mutation of it into the Rubik's Cube of recycling shadows and emotions. And it's a comment on culture and how it's constantly changing. The piece is interactive, like culture. You are the one who is changing its constellation, and it's also, it changes at night. It becomes a light object, so it lights up. And of course, I could not use all the shadows on the periodic table of emotions, but the idea was, if the piece is vandalized, it would not be replaced identically. We would just go through all the shadows in the periodic table. So it would, you know, also develop. And my most recent work, the first main project I guess I'll have after this Corona time, is the opening of a show in Photon Gallery in Ljubjana, not Vienna. And it will take place now 4th of June. and I'm presenting a new piece where it's a sonic sound photography installation, which is including also sensors. So again, it's interactive, and it's basically seeing sound and hearing images. And it's called Sound Escapes or Soundscapes. And it's working with plexiglass, but in a much more sculptural aspect. So very big blocks of plexiglass and sound, which is coming from the installation I had in St. John the Divine and Laurie Anderson drones that she had there.
How big are those pieces?
So these pieces, they are, I would say, about like a little bit larger than A3 blocks, and they are thick, I think about 30-40 centimeters. So they're quite, yeah, they're quite massive. And fortunately, plexiglass is expensive too. So if it was up to me, I would make them even bigger, but there's limits to, yeah, how and what you can do. But the idea was to really show ice in different forms. So as a thin sheet of ice or a big, block of ice, and so the face captured in between. And then the sound, like if you could hear the ice, what it would be saying, that this is the sound that is emitted when you step close to the sculpture. And because all the sculptures have a sound, there is a chorus that is created. So you're actually creating a chorus which lingers around you for a while as a spectator.
Some of these paintings, or these works, excuse me, looking at, especially the mouth open and coming out of the void, kind of reminds me of Edward Monk's painting, The Scream. And I'm thinking back to your shadows and thinking back to your psychology background, becomes more intriguing when you begin to think about this presence coming through the lacework, through the ice, how we begin to interpret and read that image and those group of images. And how also they begin to relate to your previous work. I mean, the forms and the patterns on the surface go back to your lace work.
That's true. I didn't even think of that with especially here with the patterns of the ice and kind of ice flowers that are there. Mm-hmm. But it's a very good observation actually with Edward Munch. He is one of my big inspirations, painters are. And I really wanted to see how could I translate that famous painting into photography. So that was actually the inspiration behind this screaming piece. I'm happy you found that out.
Yeah.
And then here, just as a side note, I added Corona Rose, which is a piece I created now just at the beginning of the quarantine time with the lace works outside in the backyard where I am. And, showing, as I think art and most artists do, we try to see, we try to always turn something that's negative into something positive. That's why so many art projects you see coming into kind of desolated areas, and then the area, becomes popular and the artists move away. So this piece is talking about the Corona time and how taking a rose as inspiration, even a rose, it's so full of beauty, but it nevertheless has its thorns that are also there. But it's the beauty of the rose, so that overtakes and wins in the end.
Nice. How much time does this cover? What's the span of time for these works, from the very earliest ones in Photon to these current works?
So I always go back and forth. I work with different media all the time, and I also show where it's possible I will include sound also not just the visual image. So I don't know. I mean, I've been, let's say my first show out of university was in 2006. And since then, I've been really actively working. It started out mostly with the black and white photography. And then in 2000, I think 12 was my first lace installation. And then I started to include and work a lot on sound as well. And performance has always, in a way, been with me because I spent a lot of years before visual arts in dance. So the body within a given space has always been my way of expression. Or also, that's why I incorporate in photography the human body. It's, to me, a better vehicle to express my thoughts than a landscape of nature, for example.
We're still here. Okay. One of the things I was thinking about looking at this work over a period of time is a persistence of vision that you demonstrated for us. Kind of building on your work and the insights that you get out of that work, building on it. As you said, sometimes you go back to previous work and you bring it forward, but you change it somewhat. The context is different, and the reference points that you pull from that experience. I mean, I think it's really intriguing to follow that development of ideas and a vision that you have. And in a sense, these are all images. Even the installations, they are images that you've created, right? They don't have to be photographic. They're just presence is also an image and experience for the viewer. So I found that extremely interesting thinking about it. That's why I said, over time, how much time does this work really cover as you showed us tonight? Because you've been busy. You've been busy.
Yeah, that is true. I guess it's my life work, like for any artist, I would imagine. Um, but yeah, for me, it's art is so fascinating. It's very close to me as science because as an artist, I think you are allowed to be very curious and to constantly observe, like in science, and to visualize some invisible things and materialize them. But you're allowed to question or to come up with probably maybe more crazy things. You don't have to prove everything always, as in science. And so you're constantly, nothing that you've done in the past is something that disappears. It always comes back somehow, and can be integrated or updated, in a way.
There's those shadows that keep coming back.
True. Always shadows.
Always, we all have shadows. Sometimes we call them skeletons. But yeah, those shadows. Yeah, so I think, looking at your work, is anything developing now? I was thinking also of the mask that we all are wearing these days, and your work, right? I mean, anything developing? What's happening next after the photon exhibits?
So after the photon, like I mentioned, I was supposed to have a couple of projects that were supposed to take place now. The performance in Vienna in this outside garden space, which would be fascinating, but that got postponed. And the 28 Liberty Street project should happen sometime. It's also with the periodic table of emotions in a video form. That's been postponed. And then I have a show in Berlin, which has been postponed to December. The Biennale in India has been postponed to next year, December. But I'm working. I've been, working with this theme, which of course you're inspired by everyday context, the coronavirus in video form. And with sound project, I'm working on another, actually the forerunner, what happened before the performance piece that we presented through VASA Eden Transplanted.
Mhm.
What happened on Earth before to make the human want to go into outer space. So I'm keeping myself busy. But there's always a couple of projects happening for me parallelly.
Yeah, like I said, you've
And then,
been busy. Yeah, you've been
yeah.
busy. And I think what amazes me is that you were in the operating rooms when they're doing the transplant. They brought you in because they valued an artist seeing this and being affected by your own creativity because now you've seen this, right? And I think that's so interesting. And so much
Yeah,
to your credit that they trusted you to come in.
that psychology did help there, I have to say, because they said, "Are you going to faint?" I said, "No." And they saw a degree in psychology, so that made them see a connection with science. And but I have to say, I'm grateful to art because it enables me to like see lives of different people or how they live, which I wouldn't be able to. That's for me the most fascinating in art. I can really, you have certain times more open doors, and because you have this sticker as an artist attached to you, which is not necessarily good. And we're all artists in the end, every human. But you're allowed to look and question things. So sometimes it helps you, like with the certain surgeons. Of course, not everybody. Some people don't really care or have the patience for that. But I was lucky to find the people who did have the patience and who valued, yes, this other way of looking at things. And the surgeons, and thanks God, they don't ask themselves while they're operating, oh, can I feel like the border of the body, or where is the border of the body, which are
Yeah.
things I was interested in trying to perceive while you're in the operating room, and then asking the surgeons about their experience and how they feel and think.
That must have been intriguing because you said you're also a writer.
Yes.
What kind of work are you writing about? What are you doing?
Well, my first published writing was a poetry collection called This Space is a Box. And then I wrote a couple of novels, that are love stories. But I always start working first as a film script, which I then develop into a book. So it's always, again, a more visual approach, because a film script requires you to, see the image, and it's more writing through the visual aspect, I think. And for me, the literary and visual aspect are, equally important. And like I said, for me, it's fascinating. Even with my books, I would give equal value, and publishers didn't like me because of that, to typography. And, I would give them a hard time because the typography was different to express also the different characters. Or once I had a character of walls, and they had, particular visual aspect to them that had to be there.
Yeah, I'm
So
sure they're challenged by any artist, but especially you coming in and saying, "This is what I need. This is what I want." Yeah. What can I say? I mean, your amazing work you're doing, and persistence of vision. You keep doing it. I'm really excited to see what you do in the future.
thank you.
Yeah.
We'll see. I think it's going to change a bit, like, especially for me, because I worked, kind of globally. And now we'll see how art develops. But, there's always, I think art has always been the most important in critical times. So it's an exciting time, I think, in that way.
Yeah. It offers a lot of opportunities for artists to think through and create things related to what we're going through on a global scale.
Exactly.
Well, look, I know our time is getting short with Zoom. Okay, so I just want to thank you for coming in and showing us your work, and I found it very exciting, and especially since I've seen some of the work, it kind of brought back good memories. And I want to wish you the best in everything else you're doing, and definitely keep sending VASA videos of your installations, and that's great.
Thank you so much, Roberto. And I'm honored to be, part of VASA. And I hope to see you soon.
Yeah.
I,
Well, the
I,
honor is both of ours. The honor is both of ours. Okay. Well, you take care and enjoy being home.
I am. I'm not taking it for granted.
Okay. Ciao.
Ciao.